Hello YouTube, Livelife8072 here, and this week my rant is about an attempted murder of police officers in Arizona about 3 days ago. I'm also going to be responding to some of the comments made by Livelife8072 on this. I will link up his video in the description along with the research I've done in making this video. Also, before I start, I do credit Livelife8072 for bringing this to my attention, although I also shake my head at the lack of nuance in his video and ignoring things in at least one of the links he left in his video until near the end of said video. And finally, I don't disagree with everything in his video. There are parts I actually agree with him on. I'll note those. And of course, I'll be talking about the parts that I disagree with him on. So with all of that out of the way, let's begin.
We want to get back to this video out of Phoenix. Watch this. This car just plows at high speed right into three cops at a gas station. One was hit so hard he was tossed several feet into the air. That officer got a head injury. It was his first day of training. Another one has a broken leg. All of them are alive at this hour. Police say the driver intentionally crashed his car into the officers. The 44-year-old was booked on 3 counts of attempted murder. Oh my God, this is terrible. They're still soft on motive. They don't know whether or not this was an instability or just straight evil.
Here I am actually going to respond to the news people here, not Livelife8072. That comes later. The motive was pretty clear when you go into the history of the guy. The person who ran over the cops was a part of the black supremacist / separatist hate group known as the new Black Panther Party, a group already with cops' blood on their hands. This guy almost certainly hates cops and decided to try and kill some. Found some in the area, just in the car park as he pulled out, and decided to drive his car into them. The motive was evil. It is obvious in that footage that Mark Laquan Payne drove that car into the cops on purpose with the intention to kill. It's obvious from the speed the car was travelling, how far away the car started in the shot, and the fact that the car actually hit the patrol van and went into the convenience store. It's good to know the cops are okay and the guy responsible was arrested. So, just before I go into Livelife8072's video, I do want to read out this from the anti-white regressive as fuck hate group, the Southern Poverty Law Center. I'll link this up in the description as well. Extremist files, extremist groups, ideologies, black separatists. Black separatists typically oppose integration and racial intermarriage, and they want separate institutions or even a separate nation for blacks. Most forms of black separatism are strongly anti-white and anti-Semitic, and a number of religious versions assert that blacks are the biblical chosen people of God. Black separatists typically oppose integration and racial intermarriage, and they want separate institutions or even a separate nation for black people in America. Most contemporary forms of black separatism are strongly anti-white and anti-Semitic, and a number of religious verses assert that blacks, not Jews, are the biblical chosen people of God. Although the Southern Poverty Law Center recognizes that much black racism in America is, at least in part, a response to centuries of white racism, it believes racism must be exposed in all its forms. White groups espousing beliefs similar to black separatists would be considered clearly racist. The same criterion should be applied to all groups regardless of their color. As Martin Luther King Jr. once said, violence begets violence, hate begets hate, and toughness begets a greater toughness. It is all a descending spiral, and the end is destruction for everybody. Along the way of life, someone must have enough sense and morality to cut off the chain of hate. A leading example of a black separatist group is the Nation of Islam, led by Louis Farrakhan. In 1997, and less explicit ways since then, Farrakhan made clear that he has renounced none of the anti-white, anti-Semitic, anti-Catholic, and anti-gay views of the previous nation leader, Elijah Muhammad. Those beliefs include the view that Yaqub, a renegade black scientist, created whites 6,600 years ago as an inherently evil and ungodly people, blue-eyed devils. Farrakhan has described Catholics and Jews, who he says practice a gutter religion, as preying on blacks. He regrets the tone of a former principal subordinate who called for slaughtering white South Africans, but agreed with the message. He called for racial separatism and invaded against interracial relationships. If a white group espoused similar beliefs which the colours reverse, few would have trouble describing it as racist and anti-Semitic. Although the racism of a group like the Nation may be relatively easy to understand, if we seek to expose white hate groups, we cannot be in the business of explaining away the black ones. Recent news, hate and extremism. Black separatist suspect identified in shooting a transgender woman. Hate and extremism, St. Louis area. Churches targeted of hate-related arson and graffiti. Interesting, isn't it? They do go after the black separatist and supremacist groups. If they were truly anti-white, regressive as fuck and hate group, like these people claim, then there will be no mention of the Nation of Islam, the new Black Panther Party, and there's a good chance I'm going to butcher the name of this group, the Nuwaubian Nation of Moors. I know lots of people in the comments section want Black Lives Matter to be declared a hate group. It isn't too hard to see why, although I don't think it's necessary. Quite a few of the members of the three major mentioned hate groups from a bit earlier have infiltrated the movement, but I think there's just something I want to quickly show you. For anybody wondering why we have a horseshoe up on this screen, let me quickly explain what horseshoe theory is. The horseshoe theory in political science asserts that rather than the far left and the far right being at opposite and opposing ends of a linear political continuum, they in fact closely resemble one another, much like the ends of a horseshoe. Okay, now that is established, let's keep going. So, according to people like Livelife8072, Black Lives Matter are as bad, if not worse, than the Ku Klux Klan. This is not true. If anything, the Black Lives Matter movement is a spectrum on the other side of the horseshoe. If you want any groups that could come close to the KKK but on the black supremacist side of the horseshoe, then you don't have to look no further than the Nation of Israel, the Nuwaubian Nation of Moors, and the new Black Panthers, the last of which do have cop blood on their hands. So before I move to the Live Life response part of this long ass video, I do want to explain why I say that new Black Panthers have cop blood on their hands. Mika Johnson, the person who shot 12 cops at Dallas, Texas, killing 5 of them, has had serious interest in the new Black Panther Party and has been parroting their talking points a week before the mass shooting. Also, is it just coincidence that 12 hours before 3 cops were shot dead in Baton Rouge that the new Black Panthers had set up there? So yeah, 5 dead cops on the new Black Panthers, possibly 8. And this nearly became 11. Lucky it didn't. Now that is out of the way, it's now time to move to Livelife8072's video. And so, here we are, the response to Livelife8072. We'll begin at 118 to 123, where Live Life asks a very interesting question, and one that should be asked. What ideology do you think was responsible for Mark Payne's motivations? And the answer is, of course, black supremacist and black separatist groups. He does mention this, however the group he attributes this to is absolutely wrong, and his own link does that. Black Lives Matter. Not the new Black Panthers. He rants about Black Lives Matter until 157, and here he would be correct if he would just replace Black Lives Matter with any of the new Black Panthers, the Nuwaubian Nation of Moors, or the Nation of Israel. Actual black separatist / supremacist hate groups, according to the anti-white regressive as fuck hate group, the Southern Poverty Law Center. Links in the description. Then, at 243, Live Life asks another good question. Why did the guy do it? And I'll reference earlier. The guy was a new Black Panther who hated white people and cops and decided when he saw 3 white cops in the parking area to try and kill them. Live Life spends 2 minutes on a few clips, several camera angles of the incident, and the guy being refused custody. He then implies that the guy should have been lynched. Dude! 2 wrongs don't make a right. You don't fight fire with fire. Not only that, but if this guy was shot, first up, killing the guy would not bring justice to the cops injured in this domestic terrorist act. Secondly, it would just embolden the new Black Panther Party and play into their fucking victim complex that they're being targeted by racist cops. That would just lead to more incidents like this. Then, at 624, he asks why Black Lives Matter don't take responsibility for the shootings of cops in several places across the US. Well, in at least 2 of those cases, Baton Rouge and Dallas, it was because a person from another group, in both cases the new Black Panthers, were the ones who carried out the attack. In the New York case, the guy was enraged because a boot had been placed on his car, which he apparently lived in. So, I don't see the Black Lives Matter link there. Plus, the guy in the New York attack looked pretty white to me, so that loses more relevance. So on the last of the 3, the guy wasn't even black, and on the former 2, the guys were new Black Panthers. Is there crossover between Black Lives Matter and the new Black Panther Party? It's possible. But remember this. Cops can be killed by white people as well as black people. Live Life. Cop killing is not restricted to black people. The New York guy was white, was angry about something completely unrelated to BLM. You're blaming Black Lives Matter for something a white guy living in his car with his car booted, the car that he lived in, booted, and him reacting violently. He then goes on to claim that Black Lives Matter has an anti-cop attitude, and here, at least in some parts, that is true. There have been protests where people representing the movement chant anti-cop slogans like pigs in a blanket, fry them like bacon, and what do we want, dead cops, when do we want them now? My question to you would be, does this represent the whole movement? I'd say no. Again, spectrum from the horseshoe from earlier. Then, basically, you're wondering at this point where the whole Southern Poverty Law Center as an anti-white regressive as fuck hate group came from. Well, here it is. I'm going to be honest, I'll start off here. I don't know anything about the White Lives Matter movement. It appears to be a response to the Black Lives Matter movement. Dunno. I don't know who they are though, or what they are. I don't think they're a hate group, at least at this point. I'm agnostic about that. Again though, if the Southern Poverty Law Center is an anti-white regressive as fuck hate group, then why are the Nuwaubian Nation of Moors, the Nation of Israel, and the new Black Panther Party on their list of hate groups? If they truly were anti-white and regressive, then they would be supporting the movements, not calling them out. So, members of his audience got the Southern Poverty Law Center as an anti-white regressive as fuck hate group from, in his video, 653 to 746. Let's move on. He goes on to talk about Mark L. Payne. And he actually looks like he's of mixed race, honestly. His skin looks tanned, but not particularly light or dark. And why did he think he was necessary to run over 3 cops? Could his affiliation with the new Black Panthers have anything to do with it? Live Life then goes on to quote from his Facebook page, and honestly, the first quote sounds like someone who was part of the new Black Panthers, the Nation of Israel, or the Nuwaubian Nation of Moors would say. And for the second thing, if he wants to support black business, more power to him. Here I agree on this particular part with Live Life. Like I said, I don't disagree with everything in this video, just some parts. Well, a lot of parts actually. Then at 8:58 to 9:16, he goes to the LinkedIn page of the guy and backs up what he'd said about supporting black businesses. He's part of the new Black Panthers, so of course he wouldn't give 2 fucks about white people and cops. What else would you expect from him? Finally, he makes one mention that the guy's a member of the new Black Panther Party at 9:34. One mention. He's attacking Black Lives Matter, making tons of attacks on them. And only once does he actually mention the new Black Panthers, causing a lot of damage to his argument. I can see why he didn't mention it more than once. Now to move on to the third part of this video, the response to the last part of his video, but also something else that I've wanted to talk about for a while. Why is there an increase in tax on law enforcement, politicians, and etc.? Both for members of radical hate groups, Islamists, and other angry individuals. It's disillusionment with the current system. An example would be the recent election in Australia. The Liberals only got about 32% of the primary vote. Labor got about 30%. That leaves 38% to have voted for various minor parties. It's even worse in the US because there's no compulsory voting. Bernie Sanders, despite everybody in the DNC being against him, held his own against Hillary Clinton. Hell, Donald Trump may become president of the US because of his rhetoric against the establishment and all the stuff the establishment stands for. And that's all despite opposition from the RNC. Once disillusionment gets to these sort of levels, people are going to rebel against the system. That's what we're seeing today with the rise of hate groups of all kinds. Another great example, Brexit. Times are changing. The rebellion against the establishment is on. People are disillusioned, people are angry, and people are going to lash out against what they see as part of the establishment. That is simple reality. And supremacist groups of all kinds, hate groups of all kinds, are just going to get bigger and stronger. So overall, the anti-cop rhetoric coming from the more radical parts of Black Lives Matter, and of course the black hate groups I've mentioned so many times now that you guys should all know them by heart, is not okay. However, police brutality in general is also a big problem, and we should also establish why black people are doing what they are doing. We have the gutting of the middle class, the removal of the factory jobs by the free trade deals. We have the racist drug war started by the racist Richard Nixon, the Klan back nearly a century ago, slavery, segregation, Jim Crow, you name it. Many, many, many factors are at play here. Black culture, yeah, that's maybe a part of it. I say if we end the drug wars, rip up the free trade deals, and get the factory jobs back into America, and things will look better within a couple of generations. For everyone, not just black people. Livelife8072, it also sounds like a 1016 that you almost deny the existence of police brutality. The main problem here, I'd say in regards to cops, is accountability. There isn't any accountability for cops who just shoot people. Not just black people, but white people as well. And normally, there's far too much leniency in the courts in favour of the cops. If there's even the slightest bit of freaking doubt, the cop gets off. It's happened a number of times. And one very small thing, at 1047, did you say 13 cops or 30 cops? There is a difference between cops being charged and actually being convicted as well. If you understood that American cops have a hell of a lot of leeway in the law, then this number becomes much more understandable. At 11:00, he says that in the eyes of Black Lives Matter, police brutality is the only issue. Well, it's not the only issue, and the issue of police brutality is not unique to Black Lives Matter. If you understood that American cops have a hell of a lot of leeway in the law and in the courts, then you'd probably understand that. There are people who are concerned that police are too violent in arresting people. It almost sounds like you're trying to minimise the existence of police brutality, even though it is an issue, even if it is not as big as BLM makes it out to be. Now, the first two pieces of advice Live Life gives to all races are perfectly fine. But number 3, I knew was coming. Dude, police in many places are instructed by their higher-ups to patrol black neighbourhoods much more than white neighbourhoods. They're told by their higher-ups to patrol black neighbourhoods. So they arrest more black people. And then idiots like you, and atheism is unstoppable, who don't understand the context of why black people get arrested so much, come out and say, well, black people need to stop committing crimes. I know how you said that, and considering the context of your video, you implied it. So not the worst video I responded to, and it got me a chance to talk about a few more things that I hadn't had a chance to talk about myself. I'll give a bit of credit to Live Life for that. So that is my video for this week. I hope it was informative. Please rate, comment, share and subscribe, and have a great day everyone.